So I'm going to introduce the last panel of the morning. And I got to take my glasses off for this, sorry. Our last panel reminds us that it's not just homelessness service providers and the sector that is responding to homelessness in the community. There have been many non-traditional sectors bringing creative solutions to the table, and we continue to embrace them. To help us highlight two in New Hampshire, let me first introduce our moderator for this session, someone who I'm pretty sure most of you are very familiar with. She's one of our strongest advocates in the state, making sure that our voices and the voices of those we serve are collectively heard across all legislative halls right across the street. So please join me in welcoming Executive Director of Housing Action New Hampshire, Elissa Margolin. I also should have said, and Alyssa's going to talk about this more, so if our panelists want to make their way up, come on up. We had a last night change in our panelist. Caitlin Jones, a social worker from Dover Police Department, had a family emergency, and so we've had a switch, and I really want to thank you for this. And so Alyssa's going to read Alex's bio, but I just wanted folks to understand why Caitlin wasn't walking up right now.
Good morning, everyone. As Stephanie said, I'm Elissa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. I'm delighted to moderate this panel to talk about non-traditional engagement. We'll be talking about, obviously, the role of law enforcement with Detective Eric Adams and Sergeant Alex Matrucci. I have to say, Alex, I think you've had all of 12 hours to prepare for this morning's presentation.
Around there, yeah.
We know law enforcement, you're on your feet, so thank you. I really do look forward to the conversation. Let me share a little bit about their backgrounds. Detective Eric Adams, many of you know, he serves on the Council on Housing Stability, one of the groups bringing us together this morning. 21 years in law enforcement. He's been with the Laconia Police Department since 2012, and he's currently assigned to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. In his role, he works directly with individuals and families who are struggling with homelessness, substance use disorder, and tries to help with the support network to help them navigate barriers. And he also is part of several boards, including New Futures, Lakes Region Community Services, the Public Health Council, Community Wellness, and Belknap Local Service Delivery Area. So please join me in welcoming Detective Eric Adams. And then we have Sergeant Alex Matrucci, the commander of the Community Response and Engagement Unit in Dover. He's been a New Hampshire police officer for 21 years. He is the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator, Peer Support and Adverse Childhood Experience Response Team Leader, Chair of the Mental Health Committee, and member of the Dover Mental Health Alliance, and a NAMI Connect Suicide Prevention Trainer. He also oversees a lot of outreach positions at the Dover Police Department and has most recently brought on the department's first social worker. And he runs several community policing programs, just in case, homeless outreach, suicide prevention, and more. Welcome, Sergeant. I just want to say that this morning it was raining a little bit, it was foggy, and it was just like kind of looking for that place to park. And it was that awkward moment, someone was coming around the road and I saw a spot I really wanted, so I pulled my car out. I don't know if I left enough room. And of course I pulled in front of law enforcement here this morning and probably cut off Detective Adams, probably a little too close. He's very nice about it. But no, I am thinking there. One of my colleagues at Housing Action New Hampshire, Tom DeRosa, who many of you know, is from a law enforcement family in New York City, and we have this conversation all the time about the many faces of law enforcement that we don't think of. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing about your work and your experience. So let me turn it over to you. Thank you.
Do you want to go first? Sure. So again, I'm apologizing in advance because I'm going to do my best to really just kind of praise the position that Caitlin Jones has at the police department, our first police social worker. And I'm just going to quickly talk about what she does and what her role is. So she's actually a Dover Police Department employee. She's not a sworn officer. She has her MSW. She used to work at the Rochester school system as a guidance counselor. Can everybody hear me? Yep. Yeah, I'm not used to a microphone, so I'm afraid to get too close to it too. But so Caitlin's position was a grant-funded position. She started with us in February of this year, and immediately the department recognized the importance of the role, and she's now in the budget as a regular budgeted member of the police department, and that's allowing us to start seeking a second police social worker. We're also actively looking at grants to fund potentially more social workers. And we've also, again, just recognizing the importance and the value of a social worker being on staff in the police department. We've started building a relationship with University of New Hampshire and their social work program. We already have interns set up to start in the fall and in the spring. So we're really expanding on the mental health, because homelessness is a slice of what Caitlin does. But we're really working on like a mental health unit within the police department. That's kind of my goal, at least through my unit. And I have support, obviously, from the mayor, Mayor Bob Carrer, and my police chief, Bill Breaux. We have full support of having a social worker on staff. And also the officers. I can't tell you how often the officers are referring people that they interact with in the community to Caitlin. It's daily. It's to the point where we've had to kind of filter out what they're doing, because the officers are going to calls. They're seeing the need. It's not just with homelessness, but it's with everybody in the community. They're seeing this need where people have this, basically an unmet social service need. And the officers kind of recognize that, and they're doing the best they can by referring people to 211 or welfare department or community action partnership. But I think a lot of the officers were feeling like they're leaving the scene of whatever they were there for in the first place. And it's kind of open-ended. They don't know if they gave the right information to the person. They don't know if they got them connected to the right services. So now having Caitlin on staff, they can directly connect that family, that person, with a social worker who can kind of create that kind of like base, that first step to a future continuum of care. So I think it's helpful for the officers because they know that they're connecting that individual with somebody that can help them and get them connected with services. And it's also helpful for that person that had these unmet needs that is now starting to build a relationship with a social worker who can help connect them. So that's kind of my spiel right now.
All right, thank you, Detective. We'll turn it over to you.
All right. Can everybody hear me? I don't really talk with a microphone. I'm kind of nervous.
Yeah.
So my name's Eric Adams. So I do work for Laconia Police Department. And so I've kind of been in this realm. And to say I'm very glad that none of you got up and took off when law enforcement was on the panel. So I want to thank you all for that. And so historically, right, we've always kind of been siloed from dealing with our own things. And so in 2014, the Laconia Police Department started a program that started to work with individuals, our most high utilizers of our system, right? Addiction, mental health, homelessness. And so I ended up taking a position at the PD where we created an opportunity to be able to try and find resources and really work one-on-one in a support network. And so to do that, I had to learn basically what it was all of you do. And so when I first started doing that connection, it was interesting. I had a lot of, you're a police officer and you don't do this stuff, so all you do is put handcuffs on people. And so I got to thinking about it, and unfortunately, yes, right, we have a job to do. But that doesn't mean that that's where the road ends. And so for us, and for the position that we have at the PD, we work, and I say we, because it really is not just me. It's our patrol officers, but yet it's all of the community partners that we have. It is working with someone in a one-on-one capacity and trying to lift them up, right? And there are so many different facets to it that you all know about. And so for us, it was kind of like this new journey of how do we connect all of the community partners and resources that we do see but don't really know about, and then how do we make those connections and grow those partnerships? And so I'll fast forward. That was back in 2014. I'll fast forward to now. The Department of Justice, along with the Laconia Police Department, actually was awarded a $4 million grant where we will expand the program that we have at the PD to several other police departments in the state, which means that those communities will now start working and identifying and building up resources that are already in the community, but building them up so that the police department can actually be a part of them, right? So you think law enforcement. Now, there was a lot of things about the releases of information or things like that. That was a huge barrier for me as well, trying to figure out how do I help someone, and we'll get into that in those questions. But know that law enforcement has come a long way, and if there's one thing I can ask you to do, right, is to take that moment, right, and kind of the moment that you've heard that law enforcement has been a negative light to someone that you've worked with, right, just take that and set it aside for one moment, right, and just listen to some of the things that we as law enforcement, because to be honest with you, we put our pants on one leg at a time. We're not robots, right? What you need to know is that when we go through our training in the very beginning, we are trained that everybody is out to kill us. That's how we're trained. And so when you can see those types of things and you can understand that our training is definitely different, I hope that it will help as you go through the rest of the day and know that when you go back to your communities, you have a little bit of a different perspective on some of the things that law enforcement faces and some of the things that we do, right? There are bad apples in every organization or every agency or whatever you want to call it. But the good thing is that the good ones far outweigh, right, the bad.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I want to talk about this issue of trust that you've raised so eloquently and that Todd raised and many of the panels have in talking about whether you're working with your clients or working with your staff. And so, as you said, you were coming to a different social services culture where they're talking about harm reduction and early childhood trauma and self-care and just a very different conversation. And you're talking about that, you're talking about a training that's everyone's trying to kill you. Mm-hmm. And so how you are approaching and the importance of partnership. So how are you building that trust with the social service community? How did you approach them? What did you find to be successful?
I can talk a little bit.
Oh, I'll go first.
Oh, you go ahead.
So for me, it was action, right? And so when I started doing this, I had a lot of people that were in the social service industry that said, no, this is really odd. Like, a law enforcement officer wants to actually help a person. You really mean that you just want to run them for warrants and arrest them, right? That's what it is. So I had to take the action. I had to let not only the individual that I was working with know that I don't care if you have a warrant. I don't care if you're if you are wanted by a court warrant or anything like that. My concern in the moment is, how do we get you services? How do we connect you so that you're not dead tomorrow? And how do I, as a police officer, make sure that my role is not blurred out? And so if you think about it, I had to walk that fine line between being a law enforcement officer and working with someone. Because, yeah, there were a lot of individuals that I worked with that had warrants. It is what it is, right? There was a lot of individuals that I drove to treatment that I told them, stay in treatment, because if you leave, you're going to get arrested on a warrant. I knew it was one place that I could actually keep someone from getting arrested. And I would help them fill out the paperwork to extend their court hearings. So that way, they didn't have to worry about those things. They could focus on themselves and trying to get the help that they needed. And so action was, I was talking with Daisy Pierce from Navigating Recovery. So it was action. That's the only way that I could prove to all of you that the best interest was for the individual, the client, the family, and it wasn't me just trying to get stats on arresting someone.
And just the way you've articulated that, you can even hear the Venn diagram happening about you're saying, I want to make sure that you don't die tonight. And that's what we heard from our folks from Manchester, and they're doing peer-to-peer services coming from a different culture, but yet you had a very similar goal. How about you, Sergeant? Can you relate to this issue of trying to express trust to the social services community?
Yeah, yeah, and a lot, like Eric said, it's building that, and I think a lot of people have already said this too, building those partnerships and becoming members of boards, working together with different organizations. I know Caitlin is representing the PD. She's a liaison from the PD to a lot of different organizations. I've also been joining a lot of different groups too to really show what we're trying to do in Dover. And like Eric said, our priority is getting people the help that they need, because again, we're not, at least in Dover, and like Eric's saying, Laconia here, we're not trying to make arrests. We're not trying to get out there and pad our numbers. What we're trying to do is actually reduce our numbers. We want to reduce the amount of arrests that we make. We want to reduce the amount of unnecessary police interactions that we have. With certain communities, some of the unhoused and homelessness issues being one of them. So if we can connect people with the appropriate resources to reduce the amount of repeat calls for service we have with them, that's our priority. We want to connect them because it then reduces the amount of calls we have with that individual. And it's a win-win because they also get connected with the services that they need. And that way, police officers can respond to emergencies and alarms and crimes. We don't want to be the ones that are out there 24/7 interacting with like Eric said, the top three: homelessness, substance use, and mental health. But we're the ones that are out there, and we're out there 24/7. And all we can do is continue to train our officers to kind of combat that initial training that we get that everybody is out to kill us. So we do a lot of trauma-informed care. In the Dover Police Department, our goal is to have 100% of our officers trained in crisis intervention team training and how to respond to people in mental health crisis. We also have suicide prevention and mental health first aid. These are all goals to have 100% of our officers. Right now we're at 80%. And I think the national average is around 20%. So we're doing as much as we can to really teach our officers that not everybody is out to kill you. And it's working. And you can see the compassion that they have when they interact with somebody that's living in the woods that might have a warrant, the way that they can interact with that individual. Yeah, again, I think I got off topic. I'm not really answering the question.
Well, that was a perfect segue, actually, because you've talked about how to overcome cultural bias and going from law enforcement to social services. But now I'd like to talk about overcoming bias when you're talking with a person in need. And because they may have not always had the best interactions with law enforcement also. And so you're hearing you use words like compassion, working with people who are living in unsheltered environments. What can you teach? What can we learn from you? How did you build trust with that individual so you could help them?
So for me, it really was kind of just taking a look at myself and seeing what kind of person I wanted to be. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to interact with my first overdose victim. And so all I remember is sitting down with that individual in the hospital and just sitting there. And then instead of asking them, where did you get your drugs? Who's your dealer? Those questions don't work. They don't. And the sooner that all of law enforcement realizes that, the better off they will be as well. What they should be asking is, how can I help you? You almost died. You were blue. You have no place to go tonight because you were found in a hallway. How much longer do you want to keep going down this road? And then just sitting there with them, right? A lot of times patrol officers don't have that opportunity because, especially in the larger cities, and larger agencies, they're call to call to call, right? So creating these unique positions for the ability for an officer or a social worker, right, to sit with someone and spend those extra few minutes is critical. But if you don't work with community partners to do that, then when they ask you, well, what can I do or where can I go? Your answer is always going to be, I don't know. Right? So one of the biggest things that law enforcement needs to do is educate themselves. Right? Because we don't have all the answers. We never have and we never will. It's about building those community partners.
Yeah.
So, Sergeant, how about you? How are you sharing, putting across a sense of trust with folks that you're meeting who are in need?
Yeah, like Eric said, sometimes these interactions can take a very long time, and the patrol officer, especially in the city of Dover, doesn't have the time to commit to that because they do have to respond to an emergency in progress. And having Caitlin and I, we jokingly call her a second responder. She doesn't co-respond with the initial first responder, fire, EMS, police officer. She responds after the fact when things are a little bit more stable. So she's a second responder. She can be that person that I will bring out to a scene or to an individual and meet with them, and she can dedicate that time that the patrol officer just can't. And she can dedicate that time to connecting that person. And we found that within the homeless community, word has spread about her existence. One of the things that I do daily is my Monday through Friday is going out into the city of Dover, going into the woods, going into different areas in the community where we find a lot of campsites. And I bring Caitlin with me to do homeless outreach. So I introduce her. I don't go out in uniform. I'm only wearing the uniform now because my police chief likes when I wear a uniform, represent the Dover PD. But I go out plain clothes. It's less threatening because the last thing a person wants to see when they're living in a tent is a police officer walking up in uniform with a gun, and it's intimidating, and I can't really build a relationship that way. So when I go out, I'm in plain clothes. I do identify myself as a police officer, and a lot of them know me by my first name. Sometimes I'll be walking in the woods, and I hear someone yelling out, "Alex." So I look over there, and I'm like, "Oh, there you are." But I bring Caitlin with me to really kind of meet these people where they're at, because not everybody feels comfortable coming into a police department seeking for help, and not everybody thinks the police department is there to help them. So I think going out there and meeting people, talking to them, in Dover, we train our officers to, be polite to everybody, say hello, good morning, and that's also to the person that they're waking up from a park bench that was sleeping overnight. To be polite, because we might be the only person that day that actually, greeted them with a nice hello. So that's the training that we have in Dover, and I think we're building that trust within the community. I've definitely heard from some of the people that we help that they really like living in Dover in the woods, because our officers are so kind and nice. So we're building that trust because of the way we're treating people. We treat people like people. And having Caitlin there and bringing that resource out to them has built that trust.
Thank you. In advocacy, we talk a lot about the importance of messengers. Like sometimes a certain messenger can tell a policymaker a story. The policymaker may hear that story differently than if told by someone else. What role can you play in that? Or when can law enforcement be effective messengers in talking about the need for change, especially when it comes to developing more supportive housing, generating the dollars we need for real mental health treatment and substance use disorder treatments, and getting more affordable housing in the state? Thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's difficult because for patrol officers, right, when they get into this job, they get into it to the cliche answer is to help people, but that's part of it, right? And so they learn that as they move along in their careers, that it's not just about responding to emergency calls. It's really about building community relations wherever you go. And so for me, I've had the ability and the opportunity to sit on the Council on Housing Stability and do other work in this field to bring back to our agency and let our officers know that, yeah, we are doing things at the state level and at the community level, but it's going to take your input. So one of the things that we do at our PD that we started not too long ago was we were seeing a really large increase in our homeless population of the unsheltered, not just adults, but children and other and families. And so our officers now started about 6 months ago. There's 4 questions that they ask him. They're asking him, where'd you come from? How did you get here? Are you connected to any services? And are you able to identify or are you able to talk about things that we can work on in our area to help you? So we're trying to get there and solicit their input. And so the reason being is because if we don't know about them, right, then how can we help them? And it helps build a larger facet for us to be able to filter that information out to others.
Thank you. Sergeant, thoughts about the role you play either at the community level or on the boards that you've been sitting on in making sure that you carry bigger messages around the needs that you're seeing in your community?
Yeah, it's really, again, like everyone's been talking about, like building partnerships and letting everybody in this room know that we support everything that you're doing, and also let you know that we can be a resource for you as well, because we interact with a lot of people that you're looking to help, and we can contact them and get in touch with them. But again, it's just about building relationships, and we'll do anything we can to support what you're doing, I know we work a lot with like harm reduction. The police department fully supports sharps containers being distributed around the city for safe needle exchange and drop boxes in different city parks and different areas where we find a lot of used needles. We fully support any sort of harm reduction in the city. So again, we're here to support everything that everyone in this room is doing, and we just want you to know that, and feel free to contact us because we want to do this all together because we are trying to help the same people.
All right, we're going to open it up to you. A couple of questions from the audience, please.
Hi, I actually have two questions. I'm trying to decide which one to ask because I think people are getting antsy for lunch. Okay, do you have any suggestions for how particularly direct service providers can maybe interact with police departments or specific police officers who may not be in the same place as your department in regards to trauma-informed care or harm reduction, or how they interact with the folks that we work with? I think specifically with outreach, kind of sometimes what we do is inherently illegal because we're trespassing in places that people are camping illegally. And then again, how maybe we can start to have those conversations with agencies like police departments that we work with to kind of foster that kind of relationship with our folks.
Yeah, so for us, we've built the relationships with our outreach because we have street outreach. We have our recovery center that does street outreach. We have our CAP program that does street outreach. And our officers, they will go with them sometimes. But one of the good things with our department is that whenever we encounter a new encampment or anything like that, we're very quick to be able to let others know that, hey, there's an encampment here. And then they're asking the questions. Are you connected to any services? Do you know about this or do you know about that? Are you hungry? Do you know about, so it's really about that. When it comes to getting another police department engaged, if that's your issue, then going to taking a moment and going to sit down with the police chief can be very helpful. But if that's too intimidating, which some police chiefs can be that way, and maybe a little closed sometimes, find an officer at the PD, right? And talk with them out on the road, because you'll get more of an open conversation that way. And then don't be afraid to explain to them, hey, we're here to support you, and these are some of the ways that we can support you. Because to be honest with you, most police departments in the state, these officers are called to call, or they have so many other things because they're so short-staffed right now that that's not on their mind, right? What's on their mind is that reactive in trying to get to the next call. So letting them know that there's an agency or an organization that they can call and say, hey, we have this going on, that's huge. And they in my experience, they will accept that.
Yeah, and I think going right to the police chief is a great idea too, because like Eric said, many police departments are understaffed. So if you can say, I've learned from Laconia and Dover that I have a way that could reduce the amount of calls for service you have, because I know you have limited staff, by working together, that should be an incentive enough for the police chief to at least listen to. And you can always refer them to either one of us to talk to. We can tell them about the benefits of working together. So,
all right, one more question. Over there. There's one over there. Behind Ellen.
Hi, I wanted to just say thank you so much for what you do. It's been a real struggle. My own son has severe mental health and trauma, and the encounters with police departments were not good. So I'm really appreciative of what you're doing. It's much needed. So my questions are, one, how do you coordinate with the the mental health courts, where there's mental health courts. And I don't know if I know Dover has it in just a few areas in the state. And I wasn't sure if Laconia, or if you're aware if there's other areas of the state that will be getting mental health courts, if that's looking to expand. And then my second question is, you had mentioned about a $4 million grant to help spread what you're doing. And I wasn't sure if there's specific regions or specific towns that are being looked at right now for the expansion. If you could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I can, just regarding the Dover Mental Health Court, or Stratford County, Caitlin is our direct liaison. She works directly with the mental health court. I can tell you some specific examples we've had of, we had a 22-year-old woman that she had committed some crimes, and she had some suicidal ideations, and she had been hospitalized at a local hospital in the ED. Caitlin was able to coordinate between mental health court, the ED, the hospital social worker, to help this woman get down to like a step-down care, more behavioral health treatment, and long-term shelter, and got this woman a job. She's sober now. And this is, this is in the past 2 months that Caitlin's been able to do this. But we do work directly with the mental health courts. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm. So Laconia, we don't directly have one, right? But we do work in conjunction with the mental health courts in the county. The other aspect of it is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did specifically with Laconia was our direct connections with Lakes Region Mental Health Center, and providing direct contacts, but also have them come into the agency and talk about all the services that they provide, because we do have several housing units that are run by Lakes Region Mental Health within our community. And we saw in one portion, we saw a really large uptick in overdoses, and then we actually saw an overdose death. So Lakes Region Mental Health brought myself and some of our other officers in to actually work with the residents on harm reduction, and then how do we identify in its safety, because unfortunately they're getting taken for a ride. They're free to move about the community, and they're being taken advantage of. Right? So we actually had detectives that would go out and follow them and find out who they were meeting up with, so we could try and stop them from being taken advantage of. And it was scary, and it was sad. And they were being manipulated. So we try to build those relations. When it comes to the larger grant, so you have Berlin, Belmont, Claremont, Merrimack, Manchester, Londonderry, Laconia. We have another officer that's taken my role, and then Somersworth.
In alphabetical order, you shared those.
I don't know how I just did that. That was by luck. That was literally by luck. But all of those agencies are going to have a form of the program that we created at the PD, but also the addition of the ACERT program, Adverse Childhood Experiences Response Team. And so we're working with Manchester on creating that program. And in Laconia, we actually, I train officers on it, and we expanded it to all of our surrounding communities in Laconia. They all now do ACERT.
All right, please join me in thanking Detective Eric Adams and Sergeant Elissa Creasy. Thank you very much.
Let's go. Okay.
Thank you both. Greatly appreciated, and thank you, Elissa, as well. It's always a good day as a social worker. If I hear law enforcement say my favorite social work phrase, meet their clients where they're at, that is a good day. That is a good day. So the event planners have asked for lunch. It is in the hallway where the breakfast was, but they're asking everyone to please use this door to help with the flow, right? So we're just going to kind of go woohoo like that. So start getting in line. It's going to be a long one, but go enjoy lunch, and we'll reconvene in an hour.